Okay, I've always wanted to read someone books out loud, so that's what I'm gonna do. Don't know that anyone will ever see this, but it makes me happy, so I'm gonna do it. It's not like anybody's gonna be forced to watch it. So the first book we're gonna be reading is a long one, so it's definitely not gonna happen in one go. Also, if there's little like skips, that's because my dogs needed to go outside or something like that. So the first book, it's called The Eternal Ones. I'm also not particularly good at reading out loud. You'll see. It's called The Eternal Ones by Kirsten Miller. And I got it at this when I was a teenager, I was at this library event, and they did this little like book exchange. I guess they had books that just like never got checked out. So they were like, okay, you know, we're getting rid of these. And this was one of the ones that somebody else got. And I mean, it's kind of intimidating looking. It's just a big red book called The Eternal Ones. It's like, what is that? But I don't know, for some reason I was like, dude, I'll try it. And so I traded, because the kid that wanted it didn't like it. They were like, what the fuck? Anyway, sitting here grooming myself. But anyways, so I brought it home and I read it and I actually ended up loving it. So I haven't read it in years, but I know when I did, I absolutely loved it. So this might have been like an early edition as well, because it says, attention reader, this is not a finished book. This galley proof has not been corrected by the author, publisher, or printer. The design, artwork, page length, and format are subject to change, and typographical errors will be corrected during the course of production. So yeah, there's more there, but so this maybe that's why it looks so like plain. Solid red cover. I don't care. It was a good book. Part 1, The Possession of Haven Moor. Chapter 1. Haven was back. She glanced across the familiar little room. Silver clouds hovered over the skylight high above a rumpled bed. There will be mess-ups in here, so let me just start that over. There definitely will be some word fumbles. Think of this as like your sister or your parents or your whatever friend reading to you aloud, not a professional. Okay, chapter 1. I think I'm looking at the wrong thing. I feel like the camera's there. I think it's there. Awkward turtle. Okay. Haven was back. She glanced across the familiar little room. Silver clouds hovered over the skylight high above a rumpled bed. A candle sat on the edge of the vanity, waiting for the sun's weak rays to finally fade. Her gaze returned to the mirror in front of her. She smoothed a strand of her blonde bob and tucked it behind one ear. The reflection in the mirror wasn't hers, but she knew it as well as her own. The big brown eyes rimmed with kohl, the smiling lips shaped into a red cupid's bow. Once again, she watched a slim hand bearing a glowing garnet smooth a robe embroidered with gold. Haven could feel the silk passing beneath her fingertips. The girl in the mirror was waiting. A clock on the mantel over the fireplace was frozen at 5 minutes to 6. Time had slowed down to a trickle. Outside, the fall wind wailed. The trees groaned in the park. The trees groaned in the park she somehow knew was less than a block away. The crackling fire had banished the evening chill, but the girl felt no need for this warmth. She heard the sound of ladies' heels on the cobblestones below. Her heart fluttering, she scurried across the wooden floorboards to the window, careful not to let the heels of her slippers slide into the cracks. She peeked between the velvet curtains. 1 story below her, on a quaint, narrow lane, 2 women in fur coats walked past, arm in arm. The shape of their hats and the style of their shoes hadn't been in fashion for almost 100 years. The women didn't stop, and the girl sighed with relief when they finally disappeared from view. The last thing she needed was a visit from her mother on this, their first night alone together. Her eyes darted up to the skeleton of a skyscraper being built in the distance and quickly returned to the street below. A dark figure had appeared outside the lane. The girl's breathing quickened when the figure stopped at her door and stealthily checked both sides of the street. She heard a key enter the lock downstairs, then heavy steps bounding up to the second floor. In an instant, he was inside her room, his coat and hat in his hands. Auburn hair tousled, green eyes flashing, old-fashioned tweed suit, slightly ragged about the cuffs. She met him at the door and threw her arms around his neck. He let his coat drop to the floor so his cold hands could find the small of her back. When his wet lips found hers, she pressed herself against him, feeling the warmth building under his layers of cotton and wool. "I've been waiting forever," she told him. "I'm here now," he whispered as his hands passed over her body. "Ethan," she murmured as the room turned blindingly bright. That's the end of that chapter. And that chapter's in cursive. So. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Haven Moore stood on top of a footstool, gazing out the open window in front of her and willing herself not to fidget. Over the winter, the anticipation had been building inside of her. Once the weather turned warm, she found herself unable to sleep or stay still. It felt as if every cell in her body were dancing. Beyond the tall mountains that surrounded Snope City, something was waiting for her, and her impatience had grown almost too much to bear. Haven felt the urge to leap out the window, certain that the wind would carry her over the trees and deposit her exactly where she needed to be. The only thing keeping her tethered to earth was Beau's hand on the hem of her dress she was modeling. "Haven, get in here and find me that remote control," her grandmother squawked, shattering Haven's concentration. She teetered for a moment, then stumbled from her stool. "Damn, Haven, when did you get so clumsy?" Haven heard a needle hit the floor and saw Beau dip a wounded finger into her mouth. "Aw, poor thing," she mussed the boy's shaggy blonde hair. I'll be right back." Imogene always sits on the remote. It's probably wedged beneath her butt cheeks. "Should I go get a crowbar?" Beau offered. He rose to his full 6'4" and offered Haven a devilish grin, unaware that he was only inches away from getting scalped by the ceiling fan. "Keep your voice down," Haven snickered as she threw open the bedroom door. "You want to get banned for life?" Haven's bare soles pounded against the floorboards. She liked to put her whole weight into the unladylike display. As she bounded down the stairs and toward the kitchen, her mother stepped out into the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. She shook her head in a silent plea and held up 4 fingers still sticky with biscuit batter. Haven slowed her stride and let her feet land lightly. Goading her grandmother was a pleasure she'd have to forgo for now. 4 months of good behavior was a small price to pay for her freedom. Come September, she'd be a student at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, with 600 miles and an entire mountain range between her and East Tennessee. The curtains in the sitting room were pulled tight, and even the floral wallpaper— oh, I guess this would be where you take a break, because there's a space there. The curtains in the sitting room were pulled tight, and even the floral wallpaper looked gray in the gloom. Imogene Snively sat in a silk-covered chair, her spine rigid and her legs crossed at the ankles. Just back from the hairdresser, she sported a silver bouffant— I think that's how you pronounce that— that floated several inches above her scalp. Haven stopped in the doorway and let her eyes roam the room, searching for something out of place. A wilted flower snuck into the bouquet of summer roses, or a run that had started in the old lady's hose. She spotted the smudge she'd left on the mirror above the fireplace, a perfect thumbprint in the right-hand corner, and giggled softly. It was a game they played, and today Haven was ahead. "Something funny?" her grandmother asked in the sugary voice she used to bait her traps. "No, ma'am." "Is that boy still here?" "Beau," Haven corrected her. "Excuse me?" Her mother's dainty hand reached for the glasses on the table beside her. "His name is Beau." "I know his name." With her glasses on, she looked the girl over. "Haven, what on earth are you wearing?" Haven spun around in the low-cut black gown. "Like my new dress?" I thought I might wear it to church tomorrow. Imogene Snively's eyes bulged with indignation. No granddaughter of mine will stand behind the Lord with her— Don't have a stroke, Imogene. I'm only joking. We're making this for Bethany Green. Haven sighed as she reached beneath the cushion that supported the prim little woman. She fished out the remote control and switched the television on. Now, what channel do you want? Smart Alec, her grandmother snapped. Put it on the 5 o'clock news. Haven punched a few buttons, and the host of the well-known gossip show popped up on the screen. I think you're a little early for the news, Haven said. This all right for now? When did everything get to be such trash? Her grandmother chuckled. Well, if that's all there is, go on then and turn up the sound. Haven watched the volume bar expand at the bottom of the screen. A 19-year-old playboy returned to New York late last night, only a few short hours before his father's funeral was scheduled to begin. Though their relationship had been strained in recent years, inside sources have informed us that— Haven's eyes glanced up at the action. A tan, handsome young man slid out of a black Mercedes as a camera flashes— I'm starting that sentence over. A tan, handsome young man slid out of a black Mercedes as camera flashes sparkled in the car's windshield. For a moment, he stared back at the paparazzi, his face dark and unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, a corner of his mouth curled into a grin. Ethan, Haven whispered. A blaze ignited at the tips of her toes. As it began to burn its way upward, Haven felt her knees buckle beneath her. A barrage of images faded as Haven woke. Her eyes were still closed, and one leg was twisted uncomfortably beneath her. She could hear her mother and grandmother whispering nearby. We can't let your girl leave town, her grandmother insisted. But it hasn't happened in years, her mother sounded frightened. You weren't here, May. You didn't hear what she said. It's starting all over again. That is the end of chapter 2.